played it very, very, very well indeed.
No more slices for you.
Oh, look at that for judgment.
You'll learn.
Not my words, Sam. The words of Rory Daniel McIlroy, who I think we were all hoping we would never witness sing again. But if we had to, then why not as part of European celebrations after a 15-13 win in a run-of-the-mill Ryder Cup? However, are we going to fill 1 hour of Sliced?
I think we're going to have to do a better job than we ordinarily do about just really trying to focus on the thing that probably everyone wants to hear about and talk about.
So, how was Bruges?
Yes, I mean, you've led in nicely to maybe not the most tactful decision of going to Bruges during Ryder Cup week, but I will say it was my 15th wedding anniversary, and some things I just have to take precedent. I mean, you know, there are some things you just have to do. I don't say I have to do it. Obviously, I wanted to do it.
Well done. Well done.
But no, you know what? I actually did reasonably well at fitting in plenty of Ryder Cup watching. We kind of had a nice little pattern of explore Bruges in the morning, have some lunch, go back and watch, most of the foursomes, go out for dinner, and then watch the second half of the four balls. So it was
wow,
it was good.
Wow, that is aspirational wedlock. Like wonderful stuff from you and your wife. Well done. No wonder you've cruised through 15 years if you've got that kind of arrangement where you can legitimately pay a hotel to broadcast the Ryder Cup to you of a weekend. Fabulous. Well done. I'm glad you had a good time. But yeah, we're going to try, as you've alluded to already. I mean, that intro could be awful, but I just couldn't help myself. And yeah, you know, if you don't know what we're talking about, that means Sam edited it out. But we are going to try and talk as much Ryder Cup as possible, right? We're going to do our best.
I think we should, and let us start, and because we can't dodge this, Ben. Did Europe nearly snatch defeat from the jaws of victory? Because it felt a little bit like we did.
Yeah, I mean, my days on Twitter were almost over. Some may wish that they were, but I don't think I'd have come back from that. Because I have to say, I mean, I would, being me, I maintain that Sky Sports were laying it on too thick when they were saying this, you know, this could go either way when Data Golf were giving Europe a 99% chance of winning. However, they were prescient in their view that, you know, it didn't take that much for it to swing the USA's way. And never got to a point where Europe didn't have a projected 14.5, did it? It almost did. But
23%, was it? About 23% was the kind of the max chance that USA had, I think.
Right, that's interesting, and that, well, I suppose, you know, that is damning on the USA's part, isn't it? We'll get to that, but yeah, it definitely got tight and worrying, and you know, I suppose what you don't have room, even in a slow sport like golf, it's hard to stay level, and it's great that we don't stay level when we're watching sport. That's kind of the point. In the end, you know, the USA had front loaded. And they had some weak, out of form players down the bottom, and it would have been a catastrophic failure had Europe not won from that position, particularly given that, you know, the opponents that, you know, Tyrrell Hatton and Robert McIntyre in particular were facing, you know, Russell Henley's world number 3, I think. So him and Shane Lowry, their match was the match of the day, actually, in terms of the quality of it. But it would have been something from which Europe would never have recovered, really, in the sense of being able to talk about something else. It was way beyond Medina, way beyond Brookline, and an extraordinary performance, it must be said, from 11 USA players. You know, even those who, you know, even Patrick Cantlay, we give him some credit, he kept fighting. So, yeah, it was close. It was close.
But at the same time, we mustn't let it detract us from the fact that Europe had built up a very solid lead by some excellent play on Friday and Saturday. I mean, really quite dominant. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this, Ben, because I've read sort of different takes on this. I sort of said that I thought it was impressive that the USA had come back on Sunday, but they would rue underperforming on Friday and Saturday. And someone said they played really well, but Europe were just better. And I don't know. Maybe maybe not those exact words, but the notion was that they'd done a good enough job. But in my mind, the USA underperformed and Europe, arguably overperformed. But there was definitely something lacking from the USA performance, and that can come down to various things. We can look at captaincy to a certain degree. We can look at players not playing to their full ability, certainly someone like Scheffler, and we can look at the data which says that putting was probably the biggest difference. But yeah, what's your take on that?
Well, I think two things can be true, right? This was an extraordinarily impressive performance from Europe. To get 15 points at Bethpage was always going to require something extraordinary, I think. And although you can say, well, yeah, they look like we're going to get 20 points at one stage, they won the Ryder Cup fair and square. And it was an extraordinary performance, particularly those first 2 days. I don't think we will ever see anything as dominant as that on foreign soil again. In our lifetimes, I'd be surprised. It was an absolute bloodbath, and they won the first 4 sessions. What more needs to be said there? It's an extraordinary performance from Europe, this, and you're right to have said, let's not let the USA's extraordinary comeback overshadow that. I think in some ways as well, the two are linked. I think Europe gave so much over those first 2 days, not just on the course, but the energy they had to expend defending themselves off it or to the side of it, or however you want to phrase that. I think they just had nothing left, to be honest with you. And I think looking back, that's probably the mistake I made, certainly, in assuming that we tick off 4 or 5 singles wins and a couple of halves or whatever. The risk really was that Europe, as things started to go against them, didn't have any fight left. And actually a few of them did, and that's all it took. But I do think the two are linked. Maybe Europe's path to 15 points, there wasn't really a path to 17 or 18, because what they had to give up in pursuit of the magic number 14 and a half was such that they just didn't have anything left at the end. That's certainly the way it felt. You look at the approach shot Tommy hit to 18. It just, the fact that the USA were birdieing 18 and we were all of a sudden hitting it not even close until Shane stepped up. Felt like they were spent.
It felt like a few of them were kind of running on fumes a little bit. I agree, definitely down the stretch in the last few holes for certain. But yeah, like you say, certain players stepped up when it mattered, and fortunately there was enough left in the tank for players like Shane Lowry to hit that brilliant shot on the 18th hole and ultimately get a very important half. Let's talk about Luke Donald, because I think a lot of people will want to focus on the mistakes of the Team USA and Keegan Bradley, but Luke Donald has done, in my mind, a phenomenal job, and it's not just in terms of who plays with who and things like that. It's just managing to cultivate this environment in Team Europe where it really feels like a kind of brotherhood. Everyone really is, and I'm sure to an extent this has been the case with Team Europe down the years. It's not a brand new thing, but there's something about this particular team of players, from linking from Rome through to Bethpage, that they really do have this incredible unity, and they're playing for each other, and it's hard. It's got to be hard to come up against.
Yeah, totally. And look, they've spoken a lot, haven't they, in all their hype videos, I think we're supposed to call them, but all the the our place, our time stuff, which was beautifully done. They speak about those that have come before, and I think that applies to Donald as a captain as well. It's not just the players. And you think about his Ryder Cup career, and in particular, for instance, in 2012, he was part of a very different type of team that was really ran on emotional energy, from Jose Maria Olazabal down to Ian Poulter, and the way he rallied them on Saturday night. And then he experienced Paul McGinley and the approach to data, and that, Europe very much at the forefront of that. On that, the USA seem to be still in the year 2025 failing to grasp it, which is phenomenal. But Europe have done that more than a decade ago, and Donald's experienced that. He's experienced the Jose style of doing it. I'm sure he's experienced some captains who made mistakes and learned from those as well. And there are things that I look at and think, well, that's a bit much. We were talking about the bed sheets and the shampoo. I roll my eyes slightly.
I'd say the cracks in the doorway thing. I think he's spot on there. There's nothing worse than trying to get a good night's kip and you've got a beam of light coming in around the edge of the frame. I can't stand it.
Well, there is something worse than the baby waking you up at 2 a.m. But you are right. Look, the attention to detail is part of it, and I suppose again, a bit like what I was saying about Europe, and you can't have one without the other, right? So this is how Luke Donald does it, and we have to accept that he might do some things that seem a bit much, like the VR headsets and the shampoo, but that's part of the whole, and that clearly he has the total support of every member of that team, and I think. It might seem a bit hammy, but it's a team event, and although like 40% or whatever it is of the points are decided in singles, you build the order of it. You have to build a platform on team golf, and being a team it's not a box ticking thing. I'm fairly cynical when I hear you take people who do motivational speaking and stuff like. I will be the worst person to do that to. I really would, but when you've got a group of elite sports people, these are the things you need to in an individual game. Since early childhood, these guys have been focused on winning majors, and yes, maybe playing in the Ryder Cup, but ultimately to get where they want to get to, it is them and it's the ball. And now you're putting them with other people, and Europe have just got a formula, and I think it's a formula that will stand. Well, it's already standing the test of time. It doesn't matter who comes and goes, and we may come to it later. Like there is one potential thing that could sort of throw a grenade into it, and that's the line of succession behind Luke Donald. But ultimately, I hope whoever comes in just picks up and runs with what he's done. But I just want to make that point that actually captains before him as well, even back to Seve, who was a pain as a captain. Anyone will tell you that. But the passion is what he brought, and it's little bits of all those things. And he's found a brilliant formula.
Yeah, and on to some of the individual players. I mean, we can't probably talk about every player on the European team, but let's start with Tommy Fleetwood. Because, I look at his performance, what he contributed, and kind of beyond that, what you kind of see when he comes off the 18th green or whatever green it is with his playing partner. He seems like kind of the ultimate teammate anyone could wish for. I mean, whether that's Rory McIlroy, whether that's Justin Rose, I can't imagine anyone that I'd rather play golf. And it sounds weird. You can't think, well, surely you'd rather play with Rory. But there's something about Tommy Fleetwood that, I don't know, he seems to just bring out the best in everyone.
Yeah, he's achieved something extremely rare, I think, which is to make it to close to the top of his profession without being a bit of a dick. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Like they all are. Like I absolutely love Rory McIlroy, but he's got a massive chip on his shoulder. That's and why wouldn't you? I would if I were him. But it's the same for most of them, all of them. I'd say actually Scheffler's probably the obvious one you look to on the other side. But you got to have an ego. Now we'll come to where you're supposed to leave that ego later on when we talk about Bryson. But to get to where they get to, you've got to have incredible determination, self-belief, and a selfish streak. And yet Tommy doesn't seem to have those things. And he's just, whenever I think about Tommy Fleetwood, it's really cool that someone has managed to be as good as he is while being everything else that he appears to be. And I'm not really one for eulogizing about sports people because I don't know him, like he might have very different views on the world to me. But from everything we see, down to the details of like being with Ian Finnis, he's been alongside him, they're childhood friends, and the relationship he appears to have with his stepson and all those little things, he just looks like what you see is very much what you get, and what you see is someone who is proud of what he's achieved but feels privileged to be rewarded in the ways he's been rewarded, right? This is not someone who takes for granted the opportunity. And actually, probably one of the coolest moments of the week for me was his pride in having actually been able to not win with, but just play with Justin Rose at a Ryder Cup. Like, that, not everyone would have felt like that. So yeah, what more can you say? It's just a good egg.
Yeah, I know. Well, that leads nicely on to Justin Rose. Because we didn't, which I hope we may see him in foursomes. I mean, obviously you can't criticise that decision, of course, but he was fantastic in four balls. And And for a while yesterday, it looked like he may be able to snatch half a point off of Cameron Young, who was you could, I think, maybe uncontroversially say was the best player on the USA team. And singles has not been his forte, and that's something we're going to come on to soon, really, regarding sort of singles and in pairs. But yeah, I was really impressed with him, and I know that I seem to wax lyrical about him in most of our episodes, but let's not forget, he's 45 years old, he's the senior statesman on the team, and yet he still seems to keep pushing higher in terms of his achievements, and it's really impressive because you look back to when was the last one that he missed? Was it 2016?
16, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been a ridiculous notion to suggest that he may not play another Ryder Cup at that point. But he's now, I think he's something like number 12 in the world, and he's just consistently achieving more and more in the game, and he's a fantastic team player. And his, I've looked at the strokes gained data. And we always say, he seems to be great at holding putts in team match play, but the data really backs that up. I mean, it's incredible actually when you look at his putting data compared to everyone else on both teams. But yeah, just a word on Justin Rose, Ben.
Oh, I think you've summed it up nicely there. I mean, I think of everybody in Team Europe and therefore in the Ryder Cup, nobody showed more grit than he did. And it's actually probably one way, and it's probably going to sound like I'm going to dig at the US a lot in this episode, but come on, once every couple of years. But it's probably a good example. You touched on there his foursomes record. I think that's a good example of how far ahead Europe are in the data, because his foursomes record's old news. It's built from a different time, in the same way that Matt Fitzpatrick losing in 2016 alongside whoever he played with. It's just its value today is a predictive tool, is almost zero, and Europe understand that fully. I think if Justin Rose played for the USA, he'd have gone out in foursomes, because they'd look at them and they go, yeah, well, he's won 7 out of 8 or whatever it was, so he's good at foursomes. And he's not, players evolve, don't they? And we spoke about it before. Rose now is a high ceiling, low floor player. The gap between his best and worst golf has widened the older he's got, and that's not uncommon. What is uncommon is for the ceiling not to come down with it, right? The gap widens, but the ceiling comes down, the floor goes down faster. His ceiling is, I think it might have gone up. I suppose he's a world number 1 10 years ago, so maybe not, but his great golf is still great, and it's really hard to articulate how much admiration I think we both have, and everybody has, for that. The idea that you can, when you most want to, produce your best is, in any walk of life, that would be impressive. But in professional sport, it again spoke about how Tommy's a rare gift in a different way. Most professional sports people, despite being elite, under the gun, when they most want something, is when they're most vulnerable to failing, to not reaching the heights they want to reach. Apart from, maybe one putt on the 18th hole on Sunday, yet again, Justin Rose kept hitting the heights he wanted to reach. I mean, I joked about it, from 3 down, he won't lose. I was nearly right. It was a sensational effort to even keep with Cameron Young, who was the undoubted star of the US team.
Yeah, now to Rory, Ben. Now, I'm sure you're going to have more to say about him than me, but I think he had a lot to deal with, particularly on Saturday afternoon. I mean, there's something else that we'll come on to. When it started getting a bit nasty, and we saw it. I don't mean to glorify, necessarily the language or anything, but I thoroughly enjoyed him saying "shut the fuck up" to the crowd and then stiffing it to 5 feet to win the match. I mean, it just sort of was icing on the cake, really, for everything that had happened that day. But he dealt with a lot. We keep reading stuff. I mean, it's kind of a third-hand account, isn't it, a lot of the time, about things that have been said over the course of, mainly Saturday. But to kind of deal with that and sort of soak it up and still be able to produce, really, really good golf. Yes, he sort of tapered off on Sunday, and, you've alluded to this. And the reasons, really, is the amount of stuff that he did have to deal with. It's kind of not surprising, really, that he was going to, eventually something had to give, and It was still a close match for Sheffield, and neither of them really produced their best stuff on Sunday. But yeah, the Friday and Saturday he was phenomenal again.
He was, absolutely, and he's probably a bit like Rose in some respects. Yeah, I mean, he's just a great putter these days, but his putter was just fabulous. His iron play was also really good, but I suppose this week of all weeks, I'm not that interested in the how, more the what and the why. But yeah, I mean, you had one too many a strong German beer on Saturday lunchtime, I detect, because it wasn't to win the match, and I enjoyed the Tommy in the press conference last night. Just chimed in and he didn't stiff it. I had to hold the putt.
Yeah.
A great little comment from Tommy. But yeah, Rory was sensationally good again, and he's really grown into, everyone's heard by now that 15 years ago he called it an exhibition, and then he took part in it at Celtic Manor, and he understood. And he actually referenced or alluded to that sort of character trait of his of being quite emotional and reactive when he was speaking about the abuse he received. Yeah, again, people think I'm a bit misty-eyed about it, but I can't imagine what it's like. I'm quite an emotional person as well, as you may have detected. I can't imagine being within 15 feet of people who are shouting insults at my family and doing anything but getting really upset about it. And, I don't know how I would respond. I don't know, we're built differently, and if I was a professional elite sportsman, I imagine I would think, well, my best way of responding is to hit this shot to 3 feet or whatever he did, which is great. But to be able to continue to perform in that environment, a totally sickening environment, is amazing, really. And it's really nice that he completed the year this way, because for all of his individual achievements, and this is a career Grand Slam winner, we have nobody to compare him with of this generation yet. For all of those, I think to have ended on defeat, had it come to that yesterday, losing his singles match, had Europe lost 14.5, 13.5, it would have taken him a long time to get over it. And no green jacket is ever going to heal that wound, really. It was really important that they got over the line. And one of the great things was really seeing the pride he had in the fact that it was his longtime friend Shane Lowry who effectively did it in the end.
Yeah, and the other thing is, he'd said, hadn't he, 2 years ago, he said one of the biggest achievements in the sport is to win an away Ryder Cup. And
he said, and we're going to do it.
And we're going to do it. And he's been a big part of the reason that, Europe did achieve that. So, yeah, it caps off a brilliant year for him, doesn't it? So, his partner, Shane Lowry, I've seen, a couple of tweets from you about him, but yeah, put it into words. What were you impressed by Shane this week?
Well, Shane's really complex to view as a player when you look at his profile, right? I think all of us would say, well, he doesn't win golf tournaments very often. It's a slight Danny Willett element to it. He doesn't win golf tournaments that often, and there's definitely been a few he should have won or will feel he should have won. And he can do certain things when he's under pressure that demonstrate that he is someone who feels pressure and struggles in that moment as an individual. And therefore, there's not much that can sum up the sort of magic that Europe have cultivated, the way he played on Saturday night and Sunday. I think he made 9 birdies against Henley, and he's birdied 3 of the last 4 holes with the Ryder Cup on the line. He played second on 18 yesterday, and he'd have walked up to his ball after a brilliant drive, and he'd have seen Henley quite close to the lip of that bunker and thought, right, I'm in control here. And then Henley's hit it to about 10 feet. To then go and step up and hit it to 6 is amazing. And then to hold the putt, I know I only went in on the left edge, but if you were to say, was the last person on the European team you want over a 6-footer, I would suggest Shane Lowry would be that man. And yet in the moment, it doesn't matter how, does it? It went in. It's like Tiger at Torrey Pines, right? That is a millimetre or an inch or whatever you want to say from an entirely different outcome. But it doesn't matter now. And, Nick Faldo referenced Sir Nick Faldo in the commentary, Eamon Darcy, and how he beat Ben Crenshaw to win the Ryder Cup for Europe when he'd got a terrible Ryder Cup record and hadn't really shown anything. And somehow, despite sort of semi-yipping it, he got the ball in the hole. And that's what Shane Lowry's done. And he said afterwards, and we all say things in the moment that, as we reflect later, we may feel differently. But he said, winning the Open in Ireland, as he called it, will always be special. To do this was something else. And I think I could see him sticking with that. Like when we read the autobiography, I can see this being even more special. To know that he hadn't necessarily produced his best golf in Rome, where he halved his singles when it didn't matter as much. He hadn't played particularly well at Whistling Straits, although by no means the worst. He sort of stood up when others didn't. But he hadn't given anything substantive towards the European cause where we could say Shane Lowry. And now he has. And he did it first with Rory on Saturday night. Just a brilliant performance there. And then he went up another level on Sunday. I can't say enough about how great that was. Brilliant.
And the other thing to mention, of course, Ben, is, not only did he hit it inside Henley's ball, as he hit it on the exact same lines that he had the perfect read for the putt.
Perfect read, except the fact that Russell Henley somehow left the putt short. I mean,
well, yes, of course, yeah.
But yeah, and I his reaction, like, he could not have looked less cool, and that in itself is brilliant, isn't it? And you think about Shane Lowry now and his career. He's not like a proper elite golfer, right? He's not like right up there. He's going to be maybe the fifth best golfer from Ireland or whatever. It's still incredible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to. The guy's a genius. The way he hits his approaches, the hands he's got around the green. He's just a great golfer, but he's not like in the top echelon of the sport. He's one of those people for whom playing in the Ryder Cup will feel like a privilege. And you think, well, he's won the Irish Open as an amateur, with hundreds of people swarming him on the green. Most of them had backed him at 500 to 1 or whatever it was. He's won the Open at Portrush, roared, and not just won it, but won it doing handstands, just parading to victory in the rain, which somehow made that moment even more beautiful. And now he is effectively, it's the Martin Keimer putt, isn't it? Actually, Europe won the Ryder Cup in 2012 when Francesco Molinari was conceded a putt, but the montages play the Keimer putt, and the montages will play Shane Lowry's putt. It's pretty cool.
And let's not forget all the iconic aces he's made as well, on top of his...
Well, there is that, yeah. It's his reel of aces. 16 at Augusta, 17 at Sawgrass, is that?
Yeah, and there's another one.
One at Pebble? Has he done 7 at Pebble?
Yeah, Pebble Beach, yeah.
Lucky.
Selfish, isn't it? The other player. So the thing that Shane Lowry has in common with someone I want to mention was, and that player is Matt Fitzpatrick. And I feel like there were certain question marks with both of them coming, or at least from certain parties, suggesting that maybe they shouldn't be picked. We talked about this a few episodes ago, and I think it's ridiculous, really, to suggest that Lowry shouldn't be picked, and he's proved that. Matt Fitzpatrick, there's possibly slightly more question marks over, although he'd rounded into form very nicely. And as you correctly point out, Ben, his past Ryder Cup record, actually, if you look at when those starts happened, it's a completely different Matt Fitzpatrick. It's before he put on the distance. Obviously it was a rookie performance, his first one, which is always going to be it's always going to be different, isn't it? But he was excellent this week. 2.5 points. He maybe he should have got the full point against Bryson yesterday. It was an impressive comeback from Bryson actually to get half a point back, but that shouldn't detract from the fact that Fitzpatrick had a very good Ryder Cup, and that will go a long way to him making the team next year if it comes down to him being a captain's pick. Sorry, next year, 2 years' time. Yeah,
totally. And we have to give credit here to Europe for really never doubting him. And when we spoke to Paul McGinley in whatever it was, February, March time, and he said, look, we've adjusted the models or whatever it is, the data we're looking at, experience is more of a factor. And you think, now we've seen what we saw. They knew what was coming. And the idea of throwing in Marco Penge and hoping that he's playing great golf, so that's the primary indicator of, because it is, like, if you want someone to go and shoot 64 to you tomorrow, you should pick the guy who's been playing great golf for 6 to 12 months. That's basically how it works. Not the guy who's been doing it for 2 to 3 weeks, not the guy who did it 5 years ago. The guy who's been doing it sort of medium-term form, if you like. But this is different, and the idea of picking someone like Harry Hall, Marco Penge, great prospects, they both remain, and maybe they'll be at Adair Manor. I certainly hope so with Marco. But they went with the guys who could face that situation, and who can say anyone would. Well, in the end, Shane Lowry's shown exactly why he was on the team in the end. Because, I've mentioned the fact he's not always done that as an individual, but I'd still rather have him or Matt or Justin Rose or whoever it is. And you look at the wildcards for Europe in the end on Sunday, they're the ones that have won it for Europe. And this again is about you. Two things can be true. One, you need your best players generally to have good weeks to win a Ryder Cup. It's really hard to do it without them. But when it comes down to it at the end, they build your platform, they build the bridge. But if you want to go across it, you're gonna need someone else. And Europe needed Shane and Matt in the end. But I've gone off piece a bit there on Matt Fitzpatrick. Just really cool to see him do that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good because he will have been aware of this already. I think he talked about it in his press conference before. He would have been aware there was some scrutiny over his record, and to go up there under a lot of pressure really, and a hostile crowd at times and perform is really impressive. Now let's talk about Ludwig quickly because I think someone mentioned on Twitter, which I thought is excellent. It's going to be a good pub quiz question. Somewhere down the line, like who won the only full point for Europe in the Sunday singles, and it's easy to kind of look beyond that, but actually, you wouldn't say that he played phenomenally all week really, but he's come up against one of the USA's best players, and he's got a full point and a crucial full point when it comes down to it.
Yeah, you'd say he was probably Europe's worst player of the first 2 days, certainly versus expectation. But I think there's an argument he just was, maybe Sepp Straka. But you'd say as well that he'd landed a bad draw because Patrick Cantlay had won his previous 2 singles matches, beat Justin Rose in Rome. Can't remember who he beat in the one before. But just the sort of player Patrick Cantlay for whom the putts seem to go in, they've not gone in all year, and in how many putts this week, it felt like he made plenty of clutch putts. So if you'd told me it was going to come down to that match, I would have said we're in trouble. So we obviously didn't see much of it. That's just the way it went. And it's not there are lots of things I could say to criticise the TV coverage, and lots of things I could say to praise it, because actually what Sky Sports could control, I thought they were so good last week. Like, I really did. To every single part of the broadcast that they controlled was great. But, I mean, Sunday, how are we not seeing Bryson and Matt Fitzpatrick tee off on 18? That's just, I can't comprehend that. Anyway, but what were we talking about again?
Ludwig.
Ludwig. Yeah, so we didn't see a lot of his match because it didn't feel like it would be important. It's what happens. All of a sudden, the cameras emerge with these groups that look like they wouldn't matter. But, he was always ahead, and he certainly will have known on 15, 16, 17 how desperate this had become for Europe, and he didn't miss a shot. He missed a couple of putts, but he didn't miss. Like, he hit fairway green, good chance, just not giving Cantlay an inch, because we saw, like, Fitzpatrick bogeyed 17, didn't he? He gave Bryson an inch. Bryson was great, but Ludwig did not give Cantlay any hope of getting back in that match, and in the end, he's the pub quiz answer.
Right, enough praising of the European team. Let's talk about where did it all go wrong for Team USA, Ben?
Where do you start, I suppose? I mean, I think they did a lot of things wrong, but they could easily have won the Ryder Cup in the end. And then we'd be talking about, ultimately, I'm doing that thing where I don't finish my sentences again. Ultimately, you should try and analyze based not on the outcome, but on the decisions, the actions. And I think had USA completed that comeback, we should still have been able to criticise Keegan Bradley, but I just don't think anyone would have been able to. So I do think there are some very valid criticisms of Keegan for the whole period he was put in that position. I still maintain he shouldn't have been put in that position. I think they could have done with him this week on the course. But I suppose the most striking thing, and it'll annoy some people to make this point, but it's fairly black and white with these specific teams. Europe won resoundingly when it was a team game, and USA won resoundingly when it was an individual game. And that, what better sums up the Ryder Cup than that? You know, they were great individually, but they failed to fire as a team. And that, whether you think that's random or not, those are the facts. And I happen to think that it is indicative of where they go wrong and where we have got it absolutely right.
I think it is indicative, and I think the thing to remember is, and this kind of comes back to the continuity point, which Tron talked about last week. You know, obviously we're aware of the fact that Europe have these pairs, particularly who just gel. You know, are good friends and they gel very well together. You know, whether that's Rahm and Hatton, whether that's Fleetwood and McIlroy. You know, we have these kind of linchpins of the team that have built up over the last sort of 3 cups. Primarily the last 3 cups, who, you know, they're just so good as a unit, and they're so kind of tight that there really is this sense of, you know, being there for each other and not wanting to let the other one down or to build up the other player. And I think in the USA camp they haven't really got that. They haven't, you know, you could possibly argue Cantlay and Schauffele, you know, have obviously played together for quite a long time, but aside from that, they don't really have those kind of those players that go together that they can easily put together and will be able to. You can basically almost guarantee they're going to get points for you.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of putting it. You know, we've heard from various players in the past how the PGA Tour can be quite lonely, and you know, they travel as well. They travel with their families more. You know, and that's got loads of upside. Of course, it has, but it will have a knock-on effect. I would. You know, I'm just off the top of my head here. Like a lot of them get married and have kids a bit younger, I think, than we do over here, and therefore that becomes a focus. And there's probably fewer people out on the PGA Tour who are, you know, rooming with their friends and stuff, and they've got so much money they don't need to. You know, there are exceptions to that. We hear every year about the John Deere Classic House, don't we? The Sea Island Mafia and all that. There are a bunch of players who live in Jupiter and practice together at the Bears Club and Medalists and all these other places, and there are people who live on Sea Island and so on. It's not black and white. I think there's like a cultural, societal thing as well. I think, you know, watered down the idea of the American dream is kind of an individual pursuit, and at the end of it, yeah, you provide for your family, and that's, again, it's not a criticism, but I think there's probably a slightly more sort of inherent individualism to American sport. I know their best sports are team sports, but I don't know. I don't have all the answers, obviously, but I heard Cameron Young after his game, and he was fantastic. And I know he's not the most sort of outward going character, but when he spoke about what the Ryder Cup is and what it means, he sort of hesitated. He sort of said he said something like, "Well, you know, it's kind of like the biggest stage we've got," and there was a hesitation and a fumbling of the words, as if he was worried that what he was saying was, you know, you can't say that because the Masters and the US Open and all that, you know. And for Europe, it's without hesitation. And in that scenario, I sort of expected him to say, "Oh man, I've heard about this, but this is beyond my wildest dreams. This has been the coolest week of my career. I know I just won the Wyndham, but this is just millions times better." And he didn't, and I might be macro-analysing one character, but I just get that from the Americans, that the Ryder Cup, rightly or wrongly, does not mean as much. And how you change that it will take years, and it might not be changeable. It might just not be changeable. And it won't always matter because they're brilliant golfers. But when it's tight, it's hard not to conclude that, you know, it's a missing piece of the puzzle for them.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about Keegan. I mean, we haven't got a ton of time, but I do want to talk about Keegan because, you know, he shouldn't have been put in this position. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And maybe he should have picked himself. I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it? But I do think that there were some errors along the way, you know, and I'm going to call out a few of them. You know, a lot has been written about this. Morikawa and English, you know, from a data perspective, were a terrible pair. He didn't put them out once, he put them out twice. That was a fundamental mistake. Simple as that, as far as I'm concerned. Secondly, he chose to lead with foursomes. Traditionally, Europe have been much stronger in foursomes. He could have led with four balls and potentially got the USA off to a better start. In theory, may not have happened. Who knows? But that was, in my mind, a bad mistake. The course setup, he actually held his hands up to this yesterday, but there's basically no rough at all. It was, I think that it's hard to know whether that would have really made a difference at the end of the day. But would a tougher setup have helped the USA? They've got some very good drivers of the ball on their team. If you're cutting down the rough like that, it's probably not going to help. And I think ultimately, by the time he started making changes, and he did make a few changes come Saturday afternoon, it was too late.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the course setup in particular very quickly became an egregious mistake. Not least because it didn't even work for the guy it's supposed to work for, which is Bryson. The thing that I couldn't escape was that when Bryson's finest hour, it was at Winged Foot, which is in New York. It's a similar golf course, and what was it? It was hard because the rough was thick, and if you were short, Now I know the US did have some short hitters, and arguably there were some of their better players. So Russell Henley would have struggled in that scenario. JJ Spawn maybe, but when we talk about you're going to need your best players, two best players on that team, Bryson DeChambeau and Scotty Scheffler. Both of them, I would say, were undermined by that course setup. And arguably the third best player at the moment would be Cam Young, who, again, really, the thicker the rough, the better when you can hit it as hard as he can. So that was a mistake. Now, whether it would change the outcome, I don't know. I feel like Keegan Bradley is all, no one could accuse him of not caring enough. And he did a lot of things I admire. The way he spoke about Luke Donald throughout, but afterwards as well. The only real thing, afterwards, if I was nitpicking, I think the idea of this envelope rule, calling that into question when you've just lost is the wrong time. I've said it on Twitter, like if you've got a matter of principle, the worst time to bring it up is when it's just hurt you, So that is a bit like a football manager complaining about VAR when it's just cost their team a penalty, but he didn't complain the week before. You either fundamentally disagree with it or you don't. So there were some missteps, but I feel bad for him. And actually, the way things have panned out in the end, I'm glad that the USA, because they could have lost this thing 28 and it would have been devastating for him. And I think he'll leave thinking, you know what, I made a couple of mistakes, I can hold my hands up, but my team really fought for me. And I think it's a testament to the regard in which he's held that they did fight for him on Sunday. So it was a happy ending of sorts, I think, and I think he's fundamentally a decent man with a heart of gold and that he really cares about this more than probably anyone. So I really hope he's on the team at Adair Manor.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to call his character into question at all, and I'm not. I just think he essentially made some mistakes when it came to who he put out there and course set up. But these are maybe decisions that he was just a part of. I don't know. It probably wasn't solely down to him. But you mentioned the envelope rule, Ben. And I did want to bring this up because a lot of Americans are not happy with it. It does feel a little bit knee jerk, doesn't it? And dare I say, sour grapes, but. It's benefited the USA team in the past. So, we shouldn't forget that. But that said, do you agree with the rule?
I think there are two options: what they have currently, or the team whose player can't play loses that point. And on balance, I've not spent the last 12 hours thinking about it by any means, but on balance, I probably lean towards that. I think you probably give the point to Harris English. It's bad luck, but it's a very rare event. I like where the rule comes from. I think the idea that you'd get vice captains or substitutes to play is just laughably bad. Someone suggested Kevin Kisner bring his clubs. I mean, Jesus, spare us that. But I think there are really only two options for, let's not forget, a very rare occurrence. So, they're making this a big fuss now. It seems a bit daft to me. It's a bit of a deflection tactic. And
lastly, before we move on to other things, let's talk about the crowd abuse, because I don't think we should sort of skirt over it. It was bad by all accounts on Saturday afternoon, particularly. I think we were kind of warned, weren't we, that it was likely to get nasty, but it felt like that it got very, very personal. Obviously, you heard about sort of drinks being thrown at, Rory McIlroy's wife and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on this generally, and is it a problem going forward?
Well, look, we knew Bethpage in New York was going to be the sort of test for that. Like if there's going to be a problem, it's going to happen in New York, and the worst part really is that it didn't surprise anybody. I don't think. I actually thought it could get worse than that, but it was really bad. I'm certainly not seeking to downplay it, and I really hope that you get accused as a European of being like high and mighty about it. Like there are absolute knobheads from this country as well. I'm aware of that. And I'm sure some of them have called out of the golf before, and I'm very happy with treating those people as they deserve to be treated. And if they say anything that comes close to what was said to Rory McIlroy on Saturday, they should be out. Simple as that. I have never read a report of anything that bad being said to an American. It doesn't mean it hasn't happened, right? But there are plenty of, people say it was all the European journalists. Well, Joel Beale's account was the most damning, I thought, and he's not European. So there are plenty of, American journalists who've been at Ryder Cups in Europe, and I feel quite sure they haven't kept that tucked away, that something despicable was said. The only other thing I would say on it is that someone who was actually directly involved and on the golf course at Hazeltine in 2016 told me what was said when I was debating pre-Ryder Cup about whether Matt Fitzpatrick's parents were right to not go, which I don't have an opinion on. It's up to them. But they get called softs, right? And I will say this, like, what was said in 2016, and this is a first-hand account to one of the European players to do with someone in his family who is no longer with him, like, just unbelievable. And that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about "fuck you, Rory." The idea that a PGA official would try and lead that chant on the first tee, which she did, and has lost her job because of it. What can you say? There's no defense, and I hope. I know we're a bit short on time here. I hope, in time, whenever they're comfortable, that we hear from some American golfers who were there, and they say, Justin Thomas, right, who I thought was class actually over the weekend, but I want him to come out next time he's asked about it and say some of the stuff that was said to Rory McIlroy made me ashamed. That's what we need. It might not change it, but we need to hear that. I'm tired of pussyfooting around things like this. Like, there are lines and they were crossed, and I'm not into debating who's worse. People around the world can do bad things, but when they do, we should call them out.
And I think the last thing to say
I
about
thought you were
it
going to play the highest bidder jingle then, Sam, which would have been so egregious. You leaned forward. I thought, please don't play the piano.
No, the last thing I was going to say about it is that honestly, I think that it, if anything, hurt the Americans because, and I've read a fair bit about this, it's very hard to kind of vibe off that negative energy.
I
right?
totally agree.
You need people cheering for your team, right? If you have people, it is ultimately players, whether it's Justin Thomas or whoever, they're going to be embarrassed by it. And if not only embarrassed by it, you kind of sort of feel sorry for, Rory or whoever it is who's on the receiving end. I think if you're in that position, you're feeling sorry for someone, you're feeling embarrassed, you're not going to play your best golf ultimately.
No.
You need energy from the crowd, positive energy, and it completely, in my mind, completely backfired. Not that it was anyone's intention for that to happen from the inside, but yeah.
In the interest of balance, Sam, the only other thing to say is I know, to be clear, that there are an overwhelming majority of decent golf fans at that tournament last week.
Of course.
As ever, it's the minority ruining it for the rest, but we still shouldn't dance around it. It should not happen again.
No, absolutely. Right. That's the end of our Ryder Cup stuff, but let's talk very quickly, and I mean very quickly, about the world of golf this week, Ben, because this week is the Dunhill Links Championship. Tommy Fleetwood, Bob McIntyre, Matt Fitzpatrick and Tyrrell Hatton will be returning, presumably with rather bad hangovers from Bethpage, and they're sort of leading the field alongside a pretty strong field, all told. Any brief comments on this one?
Well, they were on the Stella as well, so it could be lingering by the time they get to the first tee. People will make their own minds up. They're the top four in the betting. I think after an away Ryder Cup win, it'd be surprising if any of them won, despite their obvious skills, and all four of them love the event, love the golf courses. One thing I want people to bear in mind if they're looking for some sort of hint or whatever, when the weather's bad, you want to be at Carnoustie, and that seems illogical, but it's not, because Carnoustie's hard anyway. It's actually a bit more sheltered in places, and there is some bad weather Thursday, Friday, so that could help the best players because they usually start at Carnoustie unless something's changed. That will happen again. But the place you don't want to be is Kingsbarns, and people think about it the other way. I think gradually people are coming to terms with that reality. But generally, big hitters do well in this. Nicholas Colsaerts could have won it last year. So, that when conditions are not really strong winds, you can overpower Kingsbarns and St Andrews. And if you can, Carnoustie has some eagleable par fives as well. That's not a word. So I think that's kind of what you're looking for, and I'd definitely be taking some chances.
Yeah, and the other event of note, I suppose, is the Sanderson Farms Championship on the PGA Tour. Kevin Yu defends. I had a little look at sort of recent winners and sort of people who've come close, and it strikes me that the formula is someone who hits it a long way and doesn't generally putt very well.
Yeah, you've summed it up. Luke List and Kevin Yu the last 2 years, isn't it?
Yeah, and Norlander was like runner up. Yeah. So.
Yeah, bad putters who've had a good week with it. Look, it'd be a hard one to get right. This it's obviously been a few weeks since a couple of weeks since a lot of them have played. So, but it's fun. It's a big change from last week, and as someone who got last week so spectacularly wrong, I welcome it.
Very, very quick fantasy update. I'll rattle through the top three in our league. Michael Atkin is first, David McFarlane second, Colin Delaney is third. Ben, who are your six?
Well, I've got them here in front of me, Sam. Thank you very much. After receiving
Incredible.
some criticism for my attitude towards fantasy team. Tom McKibbin, Caleb Surratt, Caleb Surratt, Surratt. Brooks, that must mean Brooks Koepka, not Daniel Brooks. Yeah, Brooks Koepka. The aforementioned Marco Penge, the aforementioned Nicholas Colsaerts, because why the hell not? And Marcus Armitage.
Nice.
I'm going to make Caleb my captain.
Ooh, okay. That's quite a sort of left field pick, but I don't hate it. I am making Koepka my captain. Was eye-catching in France. Harry Hall, I'm giving a start. Grew up on links, quite like him. Lagergren has got a phenomenal record here, and he should be a winner this year, in my mind. McKibbin, I'm joining you on. Connor Syme is sort of rounding back into form, obviously very comfortable on the turf. And Armitage, I'm joining you on, having been runner-up in 2023. Okay.
It's the highest bidder. It's the highest bidder. It's the highest bidder. It's the highest bidder.
Now, Ben, we are going to have to stay on Ryder Cup for one more week, only on the basis that that's all we have in the locker. So if anyone's got any topics, please do send them over, because the well has run dry. But this is this week's topic. This is from OTB Golf. Since 2002, 20 European players have had an unbeaten Ryder Cup. How many can you name? Since 2002, 20. It's quite a lot, isn't it? They've had an unbeaten Ryder Cup.
Whose bid is it, Sam?
I actually can't remember, but let's say it's mine.
Okay.
And I'm going to say 5. Please say
5's good, mate. You crack on.
No. Well, I'm hoping that we can include this week, right?
I would think so, yeah. You can. I'll let you.
Okay. God, this is going to be embarrassing if I don't get them right. Matt Fitzpatrick.
Did he go 2-0-1?
Yes, I believe so. Shane Lowry.
Yeah.
Please.
I mean, pretty much anyone apart from Ludwig who didn't, who lost the singles. Yeah, there's more from yes. Yeah, okay. You can have Shane Lowry. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. I'm going to say that
Halved one. Yeah.
I'm going to say Tommy Fleetwood. I don't know whether he didn't. Obviously, he lost his singles yesterday, but I think possibly in Rome he went unbeaten, or maybe even in
He didn't in Paris,
Mollywood days.
No, he lost his singles to Finau, I don't know
I
about
can-
Rome. I don't think he did. I think he lost one. Yeah, he lost one in Rome, I'm afraid. There's your mulligan gone.
I don't know, but did he do it? I feel like in Mollywood days, so back at
No, Tony Finau thumped him in the singles, I'm afraid.
that was at Paris, was it?
Yeah.
God, oh dear. In fact, I used my mulligan already. But Molinari, how about him?
Yeah. 5-0. Can't lose if you're 5-0.
McIlroy must have done it at some point.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
He must
you
have
can put
done.
him down and then we'll
Okay,
check, right?
let's
'Cause
put him down.
I've got my answer to steal.
Okay,
but
fine.
we'll give you McIlroy. Do you need one more then?
I think I need one more. Yeah.
What do you think? Did McIlroy lose? I felt like he lost one match in Wales, but I'll check that.
I'm trying to think if there's anyone else yesterday. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else yesterday, and I don't think there is. So I'll have to go back to a previous one. Ian Poulter, surely. It might be a hard one to actually. I think I have actually got the answer. I think the chap did actually send over the
You
answer.
can look at the answers because mine will be Robert McIntyre from Rome for the steal.
Okay, yeah, you got that one. So what are the ones we needed to check?
McIlroy, which I think is wrong, but Ian Poulter might be right. But I'm trying to think where.
Right, so Ian Poulter is there, 2012.
He was unbeaten at Medina.
However,
I thought he lost.
Rory McIlroy is not on the list, which means
So what does that mean? Should we call it an honourable tie? I don't know how we've lost control here.
I think honestly it means that you can steal in and get a point.
Oh wow!
So I'm going to
You
give
should
you a
have said
point.
you were injured, and we could have avoided the last game. And
I have hurt my
Well,
neck, Ben, actually. So
yeah, there you go. Neck injury, half a point each. There you go.
in the envelope is.
The Victor Hovland rule.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. I do have one request to make before we sign off, which is that I feel like we've had some pretty good episodes lately, Ben, and we've had a lot of listens, a lot of streams and downloads. And there's something very helpful you can do for us if you are a listener, and that is to rate and review our podcast on your chosen platform. It'll go a long way to helping us kind of grow and expand and all of that stuff. So if you could take 30 seconds, a minute of your time to do that, we would both hugely appreciate it. And that is all that is to be said. I hope you've enjoyed our Ryder Cup wrap-up, and we will chat next week.